welcome to the newest episode of the New Stack Makers podcast, being recorded live here on the show floor of KubeCon and Cloud Native Con 2019 in Barcelona. And today we're going to talk about DevOps security, DevSecOps, or the basic idea of bringing security or baking security into the DevOps practice, and how do you do that? And we have three panelists here today to talk about this issue. First, we have Dirk Herrmann. You're a principal product manager at Red Hat. Hello.
Nice to meet you. Sorry.
And from NIST, from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, we have Murugiah Souppaya.
Hello.
And he's been instrumental in helping organizations, both government agencies and private organizations, figure out what to do how to secure their IT infrastructure. NIST has a whole range of reports and guidelines about how best to do that, and we're very curious about what you see coming up in the DevOps space. And also we have John Morello, CTO of Twistlock.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, gentlemen, let's dive right into it. So DevOps has been the thing for a few years now. It's all about speeding up the development process. But when you talk about speeding up the development process, security groups get security admins get a little bit worried. Are you sure that when you're setting up all these things, if you have the proper permissions, you're not leaking any data or providing any vulnerabilities? And in terms of, so what do you have to start to think about if you're starting to move towards DevOps and you also have to incorporate your security department into the proceedings? Anybody want to start first with that?
I mean, I think the first thing to understand is that DevOps is a philosophy and an operational model. It's not a product or a certification, or you don't buy DevOps, right? There's a lot of people that probably sell you tools that are supposed to help you get to that point, but it's as many things are in IT. It's more about the people and the process piece than it is about the technology. So, you can go out and deploy Jenkins and OpenShift and run it on AWS and so forth, but if you don't have the organizational alignment, then you're not going to be successful with DevOps.
Though, for the purpose of this conversation, let's go ahead and assume that you're moving towards a cloud-native based infrastructure. Containers, Kubernetes maybe, but some sort of orchestra, but basically cloud first, cloud native, just to kind of whittle down the discussion a little bit.
Well, I think even if you are moving towards a cloud-native environment, you're going to be primarily building your applications as microservices and containers, using maybe even serverless functions with that as well. The biggest shift when you think about DevOps is how do you integrate the teams, if they've been siloed at least within your organization in the past, that have been doing development and operations. How do you get to them to not just collaborate and sit in the same meetings together, but to thoughtfully build tooling that enables both functions to work more productively by sharing data between them. The dev team should share more information with the operations function in terms of what they're building and how that's being described in like a manifest file for Kubernetes, for example. And similarly, the operations team should have enough visibility, or the operations function, let's say, because it may just be one team, should provide enough visibility back to the developers so it's easier to debug and find problems and resolve those problems in production.
So effectively, containers and Kubernetes have significantly changed the entire IT, how it's structured, how it's modeled and stuff it is. And DevOps is effectively helping on an organizational and collaboration model, how this could be executed with all the velocity and all the automations. And what we realized in the past few years is that we certainly left security behind. So it hasn't been able to follow up with all the new technologies, with all the new infrastructure paradigms, patterns, whatever. And this is now what DevSecOps is trying to solve, that we bring back security in the same way earlier into the software lifecycle as we did with operations in the past. So it's an ongoing path.
It seems like a lot of these projects that were built around cloud-native computing started out as projects, and I guess there's still the mindset of, we'll figure out security later on, but as it moves into the enterprise, Kubernetes is a prime example.
So I think from an enterprise perspective, I come from a large enterprise, large organization perspective. In particular, the deregulated industries, financial sectors, healthcare, U.S. government, or any government agency, pretty much. There's definitely, like John said, there's a huge cultural change that has to happen. Cloud native is really cloud native for particular, new organization coming up, startup companies. They are very adapt to that mentality. When you're looking at the traditional kind of regulated industries, they need to understand that there's a change in the way how you traditionally have written software, have deployed software, and secure software in general. So cultural changes need to come into place, which kind of break down all these silos between network security or ops, being able to get all those folks to communicate together and think differently about security. So security is not something you do at the end like traditionally you would have done. You build your application, you test it, everything functional. Then you get the security team to do the assessment, the review, so that you can actually ship that. Well, in this case, it's the notion of getting security as early as possible, integrated as part of the development life cycles of building software and running software in general. So,
is there a way to do that? I know traditionally, part of the appeal of virtual machines was the fact that you didn't need to go through the IT department, wait 90 days and get a server commission so you could start your particular project. There seems to be a natural sort of tension between the, I would say, the need for security to make sure everything is formatted correctly, everything's configured correctly, and the developer's natural urge to move stuff out as quickly as possible. Is that a challenge when setting up DevOps with security in mind? Or how do you get around it?
It certainly can be. And one of the things I've told many customers over the years is if you struggle today with the organization and management of VMs and just like the basic operations of that, you should probably not use containers and cloud native.
Right.
Because having many more things to deal with is not going to make that easier, right? Cloud native has all these great benefits, but to get those benefits, you still have to have a degree of operational discipline and organization and so forth to really achieve them. If you don't have that, if you're basically just in this kind of model where everybody deploys whatever they want, whatever images and containers and environments that they want to run into, you're just going to exacerbate the problem of disorganization, and because of that disorganization, insecurity. No one can effectively secure things that they don't know or don't understand. And so if you don't have that operational discipline to say, this is our production environment, this is our dev environment, this is our test environment, here's how we're going to build a pipeline that takes that same image from development into test, in production. It may be completely automated, and ideally you're building security in from that beginning, but if you don't have the structure to make sure that each one of those steps are clearly defined, that you understand what the responsibilities are along the way, then you're going to end up with an even greater mess at the end of all of it. Go ahead.
On the other hand, it's a great opportunity to really throw away everything you've done wrong in the past, start from scratch, build something entirely new, which is really aligned to the new modern principle. And this is also what's outlined in the NIST special publication. Start from scratch, learn from all the things you've done in the past, and try to figure out which of them are applicable to the new world and which of them are not. Yeah, so it's really a great opportunity. Many customers are just doing it that way, that they say, okay, we learned our lesson, let's do something different, and let's start from scratch, and let's work together from the very beginning, DevSec and Ops together, to plan this whole environment, infrastructure, processes, workflows, and tool chain together from day one. That's probably critical success factor.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity to actually do security right in a way. In the past, security has always been kind of ad hoc. You think of it toward the end. That's the last thing that you think of before you want to ship something, you want to deliver something. Now I think you're forcing all of the different groups within an organization to have these conversations very early in the phases and actually centralize this and have a single point of control so that you have consistent, repeatable processes in place. And the only way that you're going to be able to ship code or ship software actually go through the authorized pipeline. So there's no out-of-band mechanism, having a human accidentally publish or release something.
Right.
The process is actually well defined. Actually, you're coding the process and make it part of, make it as code. So you manage your process as code as well. And in addition to that, for regulated industry, there's this notion of compliance as well. So now compliance is the byproduct of doing good security. The artifacts and evidence
Nice.
is being produced as part of your secure development pipeline. So there's no, there's no backdoor in a sense. There's no other mechanism for releasing, your software or your products. You have to go through this authorized pipeline. But you need to have that policy in place. You need to be able to translate that policy into, an executable pipeline that can be implemented equally well across the full life cycles.
Nice, nice. One of the things, I was at Twistlock's KubeCon Day of Security today, and one of the things I heard quite a bit was about the use of the, zero trust networks, for instance, where you get away from that castle moat approach of defend each application and move towards everybody has a set standard for interacting with applications, and you can't trust the network, basically. Is this a good time? Is zero trust something that could be, as long as we're blowing everything up anyway, would it be a good time to move to the zero trust model? Or is that a bridge too far, so to speak?
No, I mean, I think it's a natural time. If you're building the underlying foundation that enables you to run, your cloud native applications, you're deploying things in Kubernetes and running those applications as microservices, it provides you the opportunity to create more of a zero trust model. I think zero trust in some cases gets a little bit misunderstood in the sense that people think of it as like, well, it just means that, like people talk directly to a particular application. I don't need other firewalls. It's really just, I would say, an additional layer of micro-segmentation more than it is about saying that you're going to just kind of throw away what you've already got. I always talk to people, and security practitioners in general have talked about multiple layers of defense in depth. You still are going to have some border level firewall that allows in traffic to port 80 or 443 or whatever. What zero trust is about is saying that you should not assume that all of your users are local and that all of your users are going to be able to talk to kind of any random port within the environment. It creates a more thoughtful way of designing the ingress into whatever your applications are. And so, if you're going to refactor everything, this is an ideal time to make sure that your infrastructure supports that.
And I would especially highlight trust becomes a very important part of this whole story, because we talked about DevSecOps, which mean the borders between those departments are not that clear anymore. And this really is a collaboration and trust model. So I talked to several security departments and basically asked them, we talked about shift left security, which means handovering responsibility of security in earlier stages of the pipeline, giving more responsibilities on the security aspects to developers, which also requires you need to trust them. So I talked to security departments and they told me, we can't hand over our tests to the developers because if they see the tests, they would be able to bypass them. And then I had to explain, if you don't trust your own developers, then it's probably not the collaboration model we are looking for. So that's trust is important, but zero trust is more on the technical level. Has a different meaning, so it's not about trust between the people and the team. Yeah.
Right, but it sounds like you're going to have to think about identity management and enterprise-wide view. And we had one of your talks at the Twistlock event today talked about the benefits of service mesh and how it basically takes care of a whole bunch of, at least at the runtime, a whole bunch of needs, role-based access control. And
well, remember one thing with zero trust and even with service mesh, it's not really as much about the user identity as it is the application identity.
Sure.
And that's the part that a lot of times gets overlooked with it. I mean, zero trust, like at the end, the end result, I guess, is that a user opens their web browser and connects directly to their app without dealing with layer 2 VPNs and things of that nature. But a lot of the security value is the individual components of each part of that application being able to securely identify themselves to one another, and then to be able to encrypt traffic between each other. That's historically been something you could have done, right? You could have set up like multiple TLS endpoints and so forth. The reason why this is more exciting now, though, is because of things like Istio that enable you to do that in a much more automatic way. But the guarantee there is to say that I know that this front-end service is the only thing that can talk to this cache service, and that those things are mutually ensuring that each one is authentic before it starts sending traffic between themselves.
Yeah, so in general, again, I'm going to take it one level up and kind of look at what really zero trust is. Zero trust is this notion of, of a number principle that you should be able to deploy. In general, it doesn't matter if it's container, virtualization, applications, human, so on and so forth. So be able to define, again, this notion of whitelisting. Traditionally we have looked at security from block the malicious stuff, and I think that's a losing battle. It's really hard to kind of identify every attacks or every threats that happen out there. You're always going to lag behind. But if you take the approach of whitelisting or least privilege principle, you give this application, this user, these devices just enough rights to be able to perform what they need to perform. And second, if you know behaviorally how these applications, these users, these devices interact with each other within the process that they're using across the network, as they're changing, keys or secret material, it could be, a token, it could be an API keys, and so on and so forth. If you manage to define clearly what these manifests are for these applications, these users, these endpoint device, and the expectation of what those devices have or should have in place in order for you to make a decision based on policy on how you're going to give them access and the type of access that they should have, and just enough access so that they can perform the job that they need to perform to meet that requirements. So now you're focusing more on the data. You're focusing on who needs to have access to a particular type of data, really, and make that decision on the fly dynamically. It doesn't matter if you're behind the enterprise firewall, you're outside the enterprise firewall, if you're using your home system or you're using a corporate system. You need to trust, but verify. So every single time you're doing this, you're actually enforcing that policy continuously.
Exactly. So monitoring and enforcement needs to happen automatically. Otherwise, it won't scale enough in a microservices world. That's the whole point.
And so this is an advantage that the service mesh can bring in, is that it allows you to refine this, I guess, the whole plane centrally, and then switch out the roles as you need them in a dynamic way.
Yep. And I think the value proposition there is really to provide this uniform mechanism for enforcing access, for monitoring,
right,
and for protecting the data as it's being transmitted across the network as a service itself, and not put that burden on the developer who are really there to build the application. They, we don't want them to do to build these capabilities into the application. That's kind of make it less efficient.
Also, I mean, if you're having the developer do it, it's not going to be uniform across the different developers.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so then you have to, how do you manage that?
Yeah.
And it becomes a mess really quickly, I take it. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the work that NIST is doing in standards around this kind of emerging space. Cloud native or DevOps, all these new technologies and processes that we're talking about. How's NIST looking at that, and what are we going to see some guidelines in the future? Or?
Yeah, so from a NIST perspective, we always has these two-pronged kind of approach. We want to look at security holistically, so it doesn't matter if it's container, virtualization, or endpoint device security, and so on and so forth. We want to manage this from a risk perspective. So risk management is a huge component that we adopt. So we want to introduce this framework at that high level. It's totally decoupling away from the actual technology that you're using today. So that's how you be able to have a consistent policy being enforced or applied across your whole enterprise, across all of the cloud services that you're using. So we have a few fundamental framework out there that can be leveraged. The NIST cybersecurity framework is really this common language that you could use to express the security capabilities that you need to implement across your network enterprise to protect data in general. So what we do is we take those high-level framework and kind of drill it down to very specific technology stack. So in about 18 months or so ago, we started working on specific guidance around container security. So we published in this special publication 800-190 that give high-level recommendation about things that organization could do to secure their containerized environment. We take those high-level controls, describe at a very high level, kind of translate it down, put it into the context of what it means for container security. So that's an initial approach that we adopted, and we're still kind of going down that path and give additional guidance as we move on.
And this is pretty valuable stuff what NIST is producing in this area. So we've used it primarily for two reasons. So the first one is we are using the NIST 800-190 special publication to define our own product strategy, to really figure out are our products aligned to the best practice and recommendation NIST provides. And at the same time also working with partners. I did a webinar with John last year where we explained how our both product portfolios fits into the NIST 800-190 story and which of the items we could satisfy together, especially. So this really helps us to define, let's say, the target state. At the same time, we are using this special publication with customers to define, okay, this is the high-level target state we want to achieve. It's doing a great job on explaining the why and the what, but it leaves it completely open or up to us the how, so how to execute it. And this is especially important if you look at customer environment. There is no unique customer environments. If you look at the CNCF landscape and all the different choices customers have with all the different technologies and all their built-in capabilities, there is no unique customer anymore. So we have plenty of different variants, and that's why we are working closely with partners and our customers, trying to understand how the new world fits into their existing landscape and how to move from A to B, and how can we help and align our product directions and our partner integrations as well. So this is pretty helpful for us. Yeah.
Nice. All right, fantastic. I think that's all the time we have right now. But gentlemen, I thank you so much for taking part in the new Stack Makers podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.
All right. Soon with another live update from the show floor at KubeCon and Cloud Native Con 2019 Europe.